So today is the big day. Today is the day that most Canadians are going to be paying attention to politics because Pierre Poilievre is tabled the final vote of non-confidence that can happen in 2024. And he's already done two of them. Now, in the previous two votes of non-confidence that took place in the past few months, you didn't have anyone support Pierre Poilievre's motion. It was just the Conservatives and a couple of straggler independents. And that was it. But now you have the Bloc Québécois, the French frogs, and they are on board with this vote of non-confidence. In fact, it might even extend beyond the Bloc and the Conservatives and leak into maybe some rogue NDP, maybe some of those rebel liberals. We're going to have to wait and see how this plays out in today's video. But a lot of people are paying attention, and everyone can agree that, hey, if we can get ourselves an early election, that would be a phenomenal Christmas present to the country. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you all to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. And I want you to stick around for the full thing because there's going to be a lot of information, a lot of debates, a lot of suspense, and it's going to be very, very exciting. Here we go. Today is the day, folks. The final vote of non-confidence of the year. Will it be enough to topple the government? Here is the detailed breakdown. Today, the House Commons will be voting on a Conservative non-confidence motion sponsored by the CPC leader, Pierre Poilievre. Two such motions have been presented to the House during this fall parliamentary session, yet both have failed, with the Bloc, the Libs, and the NDP and the Greens unanimously voting nay. Now, this one is different. This one is very different because for the first time ever, the Bloc Québécois said they would actually support the motion. And I need to pause reading this right now because they didn't just say they were going to support it. They actually have tried to put the motion forward themselves. But Pierre Poilievre did that sneaky little reach around where he froze Parliament. You know how like a few weeks ago, a month ago, everyone was making these videos of, oh, they're going to prorogue the government. It's frozen. What's going to happen? That's still going on right now because Pierre Poilievre demanded that the RCMP investigate the SDTC scandal. He went to the cops. He called the cops on Trudeau, and the cops actually answered the call and said, shit, we gotta put the donuts down and go do our job. And so they started to do their job. Now, they didn't find anything, of course, because the Liberals are pretty sneaky like that. But nonetheless, while that investigation has been taking place, government has been on complete pause. So the Bloc has said, hey, you know what? We will absolutely put forward the vote of non-confidence, but Pierre Poilievre, he's blocking Parliament. So they actually wanted to do it, but they couldn't. The only one that could do it was Pierre. So it's a very interesting strategy. You know, when people talk about playing chess, 1D chess, 2D chess, I feel like Pierre is playing chess and the other folks, right, are playing checkers. But nonetheless, let's get back to my thread here because this explains in great detail what we're about to see. This time, the Bloc Québécois said they would support the motion. So here's how a successful vote of non-confidence could look like. Since the speaker doesn't vote, Poilievre needs 50% plus one of 337 MPs. This means he needs 169 if every single member of parliament votes. Yay! CPC is going to have 119. Bloc is going to have 33 votes. Independent is going to have 2 votes. And the Liberal rebels could potentially have 15 votes. Now, the nays, the Liberals are going to do 138 votes. The NDP is going to do 25. The Greens are going to do 2. And 2 other independents are going to vote nay. This is likely how this is going to play out, folks.
Speaker.
Here we go.
Learn that the Minister of Finance is finally going to introduce her fall economic update on December 19th. She calls it a fall update. Santa Claus will already have been preparing to lift off from North Pole. The snow will have been falling. The leaves have long disappeared into the earth. Madam Speaker, and they have disintegrated and biodegraded because it has been so long since those leaves actually fell, Madam Speaker, and yet we are waiting until the 19th because she wants to hide the fact that the weak Prime Minister has lost control of deficits, has lost control of spending, has lost control of our economy. We will see if she keeps her solemn commitment to a $40 billion deficit or whether that promise will also go by the wayside. That's why we have only one request. Stop. Exactly. Just stop. In the name of God, stop the inflationary spending. Stop doubling debt. Stop driving up taxes on starving Canadians. Stop everything you're doing until we get a carbon tax election, at which time common sense Conservatives can axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
There you go, man. Well said.
And they can stop taxing new homes. That's why common sense Conservatives are proposing to get rid of the GST on new homes, to save up to $50,000 on a home for a young family trying to start out. After this government doubled the cost, it's the least that we could do. Now, they would rather have the money go to bureaucrats. They believe in trickle-down government. They take from the people, give it to one government, that gives it to another government, that gives it to a third government, that gives it to some bureaucrats, and these bureaucrats apparently are going to start shuffling papers more quickly to eventually approve some homes. It's not that this program, the Housing Accelerator, that I planned with delight to get rid of, it's not that it hasn't helped. It is that it has made the problem so much worse. Because when you give more money to bureaucrats, it's not that they don't do helpful things. It's that they stand in the way and cause even more harm. Listen to one developer who said just the other day, over the last 10 years, the list of application requirements has increased exponentially, and so has the number of bureaucrats looking at your application. And there's often a pattern of staff waiting till the last day. On the day 29 of 30, they write back with a comment pertaining to something minor, which triggers another cycle. Imagine 3 or 4 such reviews of cycle, Madam Speaker. The more of these bureaucrats, the more layers, the more delay we need. By getting rid of this program alone and doing nothing else, we will speed up housing construction. And yes, there will be greedy, fat cat, big city politicians who will whine and complain because they had expected to have that money to build their empires. My message to them is, go on whining and complaining, because I'm not here to build your empire. I'm here to build homes for Canadians. And that will be the choice, Madam Speaker, in a housing tax election. Either the NDP Liberals who fund local bureaucracies or common sense Conservatives who axe the tax to build the homes. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for St. John Rothsay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the Opposition for his speech. And, Madam Speaker, as I say often, I am from the beautiful riding of St. John Rothsay, where the Leader has visited frequently recently. But one thing that I do want to, Madam Speaker, is the pride I have in our programs, like the Housing Accelerator, like the Rapid Housing Initiative, like the Co-Investment Fund, that have benefited my riding greatly. But one thing that's certainly come to notice of late is the Leader of the Opposition calling mayors across this country incompetent, amongst other things. So my question to the Leader of the Opposition is this: will you stop calling mayors across this country incompetent, and is the mayor of my riding of St. John incompetent? Thank you.
Well, Leader of the
Probably.
I don't know his mayor, so I can't comment on that, but I know his mayor's MP is incompetent, Mr. Speaker. And we know that because since he became the MP, housing costs have doubled in St. John. He wasn't able to get the Energy East pipeline approved. He squeals away that he doesn't like the carbon tax, but then he votes to quadruple that same tax. I don't know if that's duplicity or incompetence, but probably a combination of the two. Now, one mayor was complaining the other day that I said, this is Mayor in Aurora, said he wants me to give the GST to him off of new homes. Can you imagine that? He said, do away with this idea of axing the GST on new homes and just give him the money. So every time someone buys a home in Aurora, the GST would go to the mayor instead. If that were going to help build homes, Madam Speaker, it already would have. His revenues are up 192%, while population growth and inflation has been 62% in the last 15 years. And what has that done? It's driven up more housing costs. We need less money for politicians and less taxes for home buyers.
Oral questions. Guess who's on? Operating the opposition to be next Prime Minister Canada, Pierre Poilievre.
Mr. Speaker, after doubling the debt with inflationary spending, doubling the cost of housing with more bureaucracy that blocks building, doubling the number of people using food banks with carbon taxes on farmers and truckers who bring us our food. Finally, they're planning a fall update, but they'll do it in the snow on December 16th. Our message is stop.
Yes.
Stop the inflationary spending. Stop the tax increases on food and homes. Stop indebting Canadians. Will they please just stop?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, on the 16th of December, we will present our economic record in this chamber, and we will talk about the fall economic statement. And I anticipate that you're going to hear a lot about the economic record that we've amassed. One thing that I anticipate you'll hear about is what we've done with respect to childcare. On childcare, an economic affordability model, we've brought it down to $10 a day in 8 provinces. That has resulted in 110,000 women joining the workplace. What is that record, Mr. Speaker? 85% of women are now participating in the workforce in Canada. That is a record high. That is what we stand behind on this side of the House.
Not on merit, but because your gender.
Mr. Speaker, what they've amassed is a lot of debt. In fact, they doubled the debt. This Prime Minister has added more debt than all prior Prime Ministers combined, which has caused the worst inflation in 40 years, inflation that is now rising as the debt is rising. Now, the Finance Minister said that she had a guardrail for the deficit. It would not go beyond $40 billion. If you go up to $40 billion, that means you've hit the guardrail. And if you go higher than $40 billion, you've gone through the guardrail. What's on the other side of a guardrail? A cliff.
Yeah.
Is this minister leading us off the cliff?
I mean, I'd say so.
Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Let's talk about the spending that our government is doing. Let's talk about what observers are observing. Tiff Macklem, I'm pretty sure he knows who that is. The governor of the Bank of Canada says we're no longer trying to get inflation down. Government spending is not pushing against getting inflation down. We have already brought it down. Let's talk about David Dodge, the former Bank of Canada governor who was in place when that member was in cabinet. He said because it was obsessively focused on reducing the federal deficit over fiscal years 2011 to 2016, the Harper government unnecessarily contributed to a slower rather than a more muted recovery. We're not going to follow that playbook because it didn't work.
And ask colleagues to please not take the floor so that we can hear the answer to the question clearly. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of nonpartisanship, we have put forward a motion inspired by the leader of the NDP.
Yeah, use his own words.
He said that this Prime Minister is weak, is greedy, is selfish, and is beholden to corporate interests. He has pointed out that this Prime Minister has violated the rights of workers. So we took the NDP leader's words, we put it in a motion that includes non-confidence. Will the Prime Minister allow this NDP leader a free vote so that he can vote non-confidence?
Look at the enthusiasm. One party's alive, the other party's dead. The Bloc is standing up. The Conservatives are saying, come on.
See, that is stretching the limits, of course, of question dealing with
Shut
administration.
up.
See that the Honourable Government House Leader is on her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing we know, Mr. Speaker, is that the Leader of the Opposition certainly doesn't allow any free votes for his members of Parliament. And what we also know is that he doesn't allow them to speak for themselves. What we do know is that when they put forward, try to advocate for their communities, what does he say? No, don't do that, because I don't think it's politically expedient for me. So what he does do is muzzle his own MPs, doesn't allow them to have free vote, and keeps them from standing up for their communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Imagine this. a woman in her 70s.
He took his
She's
Rolex
worked her
off.
whole life, raised her kids, done everything right. Now she's retired, and her pension doesn't go far enough, and she's got to skip meals. The Prime Minister believes that someone earning $140,000 a year deserves a check of $250, but that she doesn't. Why?
Here, here.
He took his Rolex off to try to relate to people.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to stand by our record of defending seniors. On multiple occasions in this chamber over the last 9 years, we've done things like change the retirement age from 67, as proposed by the Harper Conservatives, back down to 65. We've made targeted investments to improve old age security for those over the age of 75. Most recently, we put in place a dental care plan for seniors that has had, despite assertions by the Conservatives that it doesn't even exist, 2 million people sign up and over 1 million people actually receive services for the first time in decades. That's a record of serving seniors and assisting seniors and meeting them where they are. We'll stand by that record.
Today, the NDP leader has a chance to prove that he didn't sell out Canadian workers for his own pension. Now, he famously promised Canadians that he ripped up his coalition with the Liberals, saying they, quote, were too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Now, Conservatives agree, and Canadians want a carbon tax election. So, will the Prime Minister allow the NDP leader to vote for his own words, or did the PM whip the NDP vote to block a carbon tax election?
Everyone's standing up, and so is Pierre. Pierre's looking over at the block on stand up.
I'm afraid that question doesn't, again, meet the relevance of the administration of government. I do see the government House leader rising to answer. Colleagues, a couple of things. One, let's just make sure that when someone has the floor, that no one else is taking the floor. And B, colleagues, I would hate for us to repeat what had gone on Friday. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you mentioned, there was actually no question for the government there, but if the member opposite wants to talk about pensions, he could talk about the pension of the leader of the opposition, who, because he's been here for 2 decades, is estimated at being about $2 million, Mr. Speaker. And if he wants to talk about muzzling of members of parliament, he should probably pose the question to the leader of his own party, who doesn't like MPs that don't ask the questions that he wants them to ask. In fact, we see all of them around the outskirts of the Conservative area in this House of Commons.
If Pierre fixes Canada, give him a bigger pension. Give him a $5 million pension.
Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, it looks like this Prime Minister has lost control of everything except his control over the NDP. Now, according to the NDP leader's own words, quote, "You're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of the workers. Never." Now, we've seen that this Prime Minister has done just that, ordering binding arbitration. But the question is, what has this Prime Minister promised to the NDP in exchange for their support for his failing government and his failed carbon tax?
Yeah. And we have an opportunity to change that today.
Again,
you got mail.
That is not relevant to the administration of government or about and the chair will have something to say about this at the end of question period. But I do see that the Honourable Minister was rising on his feet. I don't know if he wants to continue to respond. I see no minister rising. The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, every time that there's a ruling about the government on this issue, there's an absolutely material question, which is the Liberal or the NDP say one thing over and over again, and then come in and support the Liberals. So asking what the Liberals have promised the NDP in favor of their support after time and time again saying all of these things, they keep supporting the government. So what has the government promised the NDP to avoid a carbon tax election?
Yeah. So Fergus is going to try and delay the vote in non-confidence to say that the Conservative question was unfair, and now he muted the mic. Wow, there's more eyeballs watching today than any other day. And this was the same thing with the previous 2 votes in non-confidence. And this guy has the audacity to go
the end of question
and be a dictator?
Perhaps I wish I could have done it earlier, but I see that the Honourable Minister is rising on her feet to answer. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, in response to that member's question that, as I think we all know, doesn't actually have to do with government business, but the member opposite, and in fact most of the Conservative caucus, know a thing or two about saying one thing and doing the opposite. They've been talking about cutting taxes, but at the first opportunity to cut taxes for Canadians, they say no, Mr. Speaker. They talk about, standing up on behalf of their constituents, but when they try to do that, the Leader of the Opposition takes away their ability to pose questions in this place. Mr. Speaker, if they don't repeat the slogans ad nauseum of the Leader of the Opposition, they're simply not allowed to speak. They're pretty good at saying one thing and doing another. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow, this is messed up.
Nose Hill.
To be very clear, Speaker, the Leader of the NDP has gotten up and railed against the Liberals for the GST measures, against workers, every possible thing. The NDP has said the government is incompetent. They said they can't vote for him. Yet every time there's a confidence motion, the NDP stand up and do what? They vote for the government. So it is the business of this place. How much is it costing Canadians? What has this administration promised the NDP to get them to vote against their leader's own words?
Yeah. There is something seriously wrong with the House Speaker. He is abusing his power today of all days.
Once again, the Honourable Government House Leader is rising to her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the honourable member knows something about railing against a leader, but one question that she might want to ask the leader of her party is why he won't get a security clearance. I believe last week at...
What did she just say? Railing against a leader?
Leadership contestant about alleged interference by India in the Conservative leadership race, but the Leader of the Opposition refuses to get a security clearance to actually learn about what happened. Mr. Speaker, he should put the security interests of Canadians ahead of his own personal interests. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
This Liberal NDP government created a fall fiscal fiasco as they failed to table their fall economic statement. After 9 years of inflationary deficits, adding more debt than every government before them combined, they have a lot to hide. Even the parliamentary budgeting officer said this feudal finance minister blew through her own fiscal guardrail of her $40 billion deficit. Why don't they just stop the economic arson, stop the tax hikes, stop the inflationary deficits, stop adding to the debt, and call a carbon tax election now?
Yep.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we know
Wreck-It Ralph.
The only thing the Conservatives are serving up for Christmas dinner are stale slogans.
The only thing that the Conservatives are serving up for Christmas
said at a Senate committee recently, government spending is not pushing up or pushing against us getting inflation down. The parliamentary budget officer also recently said the current fiscal policy in Canada is sustainable. He also said we could spend up to 1.5% more of GDP. What's appalling is to understand how the Conservative Party of Canada won't step up to support a tax break with all their obsession about tax cuts.
Hey, anyone who's on the email list, check your emails. You've just been sent an email.
For Calgary,
it's important.
While the Liberals brag about turning temporary 2-month tax tricks like taking dimes off Doritos, common sense Conservatives will tax the tax for good, because their carbon tax scam is driving more than 2 million Canadians into a food bank in a single month and 1 in 4 to skip meals. If they're so sure about quadrupling their carbon tax scam, why don't they just stop? Stop breaking the country further. Call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can choose between more tax tricks or a common-sense Conservative government that will bring home lower prices and powerful paychecks.
Hey. You can see why that's one of Pierre's right-hand man.
Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives want to talk about tax tricks. What I think is interesting is tricking Canadians into thinking that they're actually serious about cutting taxes for Canadians when the first opportunity they get to stand up in this House and support Canadians who they know well have been struggling through an inflationary period. And they won't. They stand up against, they oppose the very tax cuts that they campaigned on. A GST holiday for Canadians on essentials over the next 2 months is a good thing. I don't know how they can deny the support that Canadians deserve.
The Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, last year the finance minister said that the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And now Parliament's still waiting for the public accounts to confirm whether the minister kept that promise. Can the minister spare us the suspense and tell us what the deficit was for last year?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, our government has stuck to our
government.
That's exactly why inflation has come down for 11 months in a row, has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 11 months in a row. We were the first in the G7 to cut interest rates, and we've had 4 consecutive rate cuts. And we're looking forward to this Wednesday with the Bank of Canada. We'll have another meeting and looking forward to their announcement. Thank you.
Fucking wreck it, Ralph. What a dumbass.
Colleagues, especially the Honourable Member from Abbotsford, please do not speak unless recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, what is the point of making promises that you don't intend to try or even keep? In 2020, the finance minister said that when the need for stimulus was over, it would be withdrawn. They didn't withdraw it. Then it was that the debt to GDP ratio would continue going down, except 1 year later, it went up. And then she said the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And lo and behold, we find out she's broke that promise too. So when will someone at least admit that these folks are committing economic vandalism and tell us what the deficit is, or are they just worried that it's going to shred all the credibility that she has left?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Our government will stack up and compare our record to the Conservatives and run on that any day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Order. I'm going to ask the honourable members to please not take and have conversations over those, especially those who are using devices to be able to listen to the proceedings of the House. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary from the top, please.
From the top. Our government will stack up and run our record, our fiscal and economic record against the Conservatives any day of the week and twice on Sunday. And I'm happy.
Colleagues, the more time that the Speaker has to spend on his feet, the fewer questions we have to get through in question period. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government will run on our record on economic policy against the Conservatives any day of the week and twice on Sundays. We have
and twice on Sundays.
The lowest deficit, the lowest
freaking Neanderthal
GDP ratio. We have seen that the Stats Canada has revised the forecast for Canada for the last 3 years up, which is significant. And we're also rated by the IMF to have the strongest GDP growth in the G7. I think that economic record stands for itself, Mr. Speaker.
Before the House proceeds to the taking of this deferred recorded division, colleagues, before the House proceeds to taking this deferred recorded division, I wish to remind honourable members of the following passage from House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, at page 587, under the heading, Decorum during the taking of a vote. Quote, from the time the Speaker begins to put the question until the results of the vote are announced, members are not to enter, leave, or cross the House, nor may they make any noise or disturbance. End quote. Je suis convaincu que les honorables...
I'm convinced that honourable members will comply to this indication to make sure that our operations can happen in an ordinate way. The question is as follows. Mr. Poilievre, seconded by Mr. Muse, moved that 1. Whereas the leader of the New Democratic Party said he ripped up his supply and confidence agreement with the Liberal government. 2. Whereas the NDP leader said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people.
3, whereas the NDP leader said that the Liberal government will always cave to corporate greed and always step in to make sure the unions have no power, in response to the Liberal Labour Minister's referrals to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board that ordered the workers of Teamsters Canada Rail Conference and the ILWU 514 to resume their duties, violating their right to strike. Puis-je dispenser? Therefore, the House agrees with the NDP leader, and the House proclaims that it has lost confidence in the Prime Minister and the government. La période.
The 10-minute voting period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favour of the motion will please rise.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Conservatives, everybody standing up. The bloc is standing up. Look at that.
Monsieur Deltel.
Monsieur Deltel.
Mrs. Stubb. Mr. Paulus.
Monsieur Paulus.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Upal.
Mr. Upal.
Miss Landsman.
Miss Landsman.
Mr. Halland.
Pierre doesn't have to stand because he put the motion forward. For anyone thinking that he's voting against his own motion,
This is great.
he doesn't have to
Mr.
stand.
Barlow.
Mr. Barlow.
Miss Dancho.
Miss Dancho.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Yeah, throw some W's in the chat. Here we go.
Mr. Kerr.
Here we go. This is what everybody's been waiting for.
Mr. Bush.
Madame Larouche.
Madame Chabot.
Madame Chabot.
Madame Desbiens.
Madame Desbiens.
Wait, did the NDP chick stand up by accident?
Mr. Sauvé.
Monsieur Sauvé.
Wait, did the NDP chick stand up by accident?
Colleagues.
Did I see that right?
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Monsieur Robillard.
Le bureau va...
The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yeas pour 152, 152. Nays contre 180, 180.
I declare the motion defeated.
I see that the honourable leader of the opposition is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, you went out of your way before the vote to point out that members are not allowed to come and go during the vote. I did note that the NDP leader came in right in the middle of the vote, having missed the fact that the vote was on his own words. Would you please call him to order for having had his team vote against his own words?
There you go. Attaboy, Pierre. Attaboy, Pierre!
I see that the honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby, New Westminster,
He had to
is also rising.
Pre-start his Maserati.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That's very rich coming from the Leader of the Opposition, who has led
the fuck up,
this
Peter.
House.
You get two first names.
Own motions in Opposition Day and refused to.
You get two first names. We don't trust you.
Mr. Speaker, it is proper.
Colleagues, I very patiently listened to the member from the official opposition. I'd like to hear the honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby. I didn't catch the last little bit of his comment.
It's a bit rich for the hypocrisy we've seen from the Leader of the Official Opposition, but as you know, Mr. Speaker, in virtual parliament, you have the right to vote remotely and come in for a second vote. That is indeed what has happened in this case.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the video. Is this the outcome that you were expecting? Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. On your way out, I would like to encourage you guys one last time to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It does really help with its growth. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.